For generations, long before the Grand Canyon became a protected national park, and decades before a mysterious newspaper story captured public attention, the Hopi people preserved an extraordinary tradition. They spoke of a world existing beneath the canyon, not as a symbolic underworld or a place reached only after death, but as vast, physical underground chambers where their ancestors once lived and where mysterious beings existed long before the present world began. According to Hopi oral history, these beings were tall, covered in hair, and lived deep beneath the canyon floor. They were remembered not as monsters or myths, but as an integral part of the oldest history passed down through the Bear Clan for countless generations. Then, in April of 1909, an Arizona newspaper published a front-page story that sounded strangely familiar to these ancient accounts. A government-sponsored explorer claimed he had discovered an immense hidden cave carved directly into the sheer walls of the Grand Canyon. Inside, he reported finding sprawling underground chambers, preserved mummies, unusual artifacts, and hieroglyphic inscriptions unlike anything archaeologists had ever documented in North America. The story quickly spread across the country, capturing the imagination of the public before suddenly disappearing from the news entirely. More than a century later, a profound question remains. Was that newspaper describing an elaborate journalistic hoax, or had an explorer accidentally stumbled onto the exact same underground world the Hopi had been describing for centuries? To understand why this 1909 Grand Canyon discovery story continues to fascinate researchers and enthusiasts today, we have to begin much earlier, long before modern explorers mapped the Colorado River or archaeologists surveyed the canyon's cliffs. The Hopi were already telling a complex story about what existed beneath the landscape. For the Hopi, this was never simply folklore, it was literal history. Their oldest oral traditions describe humanity passing through a series of successive worlds before finally arriving in the one we inhabit today. According to these traditions, previous worlds ended through great global catastrophes, and each time the survivors were guided to safety underground before eventually emerging into a new age. This emergence is a cornerstone of Hopi belief, and the physical place where it happened is known as the Sipapu, a sacred opening through which their ancestors entered the present world after living below the earth. Unlike many creation stories that exist strictly in a spiritual or metaphysical realm, the Hopi tradition explicitly connects this emergence to a physical location within the landscape of northern Arizona. What makes this tradition especially intriguing is what the ancestors were said to have encountered before their journey to the surface was complete. According to the Bear Clan, whose oral history has preserved many of the oldest traditions, there were already intelligent beings living beneath the earth. The Hopi called them the Ant People. Despite the name, the descriptions do not resemble ordinary insects. They are remembered as advanced, benevolent beings who lived inside structured underground chambers and possessed deep knowledge of the subterranean world. During times of surface catastrophe, they sheltered the human ancestors, protected them, and helped them survive until it was safe to emerge. Some traditions describe them as significantly taller than ordinary humans. Others remembered them as being covered in hair, but nearly all accounts agree on one critical detail: their domain was beneath the canyon. For generations, these accounts were preserved through strict oral tradition, passed carefully from one generation to the next, long before they were ever recorded by Western anthropologists or historians. They remained an isolated part of Hopi cultural memory, completely independent of newspapers, archaeology, or government expeditions. But in the spring of 1909, the Arizona Gazette published a report that mirrored these traditions in an uncanny way. On the morning of April 5, 1909, readers opened the newspaper to an extraordinary headline announcing a monumental archaeological discovery. According to the article, an explorer named G.E. Kincaid, who identified himself as an adventurer working on an expedition associated with the Smithsonian Institution, had discovered a hidden cave carved high into the walls of the Grand Canyon. The entrance sat hundreds of feet above the waterline on an almost vertical cliff face, making it accessible only by boat along the Colorado River. What caught the nation's attention wasn't simply the remote location, but the staggering scale of what Kincaid claimed to find inside. The article described a massive underground complex extending deep into the solid rock. A long central passage reportedly stretched for more than 1,000 feet, with dozens of chambers branching off in every direction like the spokes of a wheel. Some rooms were said to contain carefully stored grain that had somehow remained perfectly preserved over centuries. Others held intricate pottery, copper tools, weapons, and carved objects, unlike anything archaeologists typically associated with the ancient cultures of the American Southwest. The report became even stranger as Kincaid described discovering several mummies seated upright rather than laid flat, carefully wrapped and preserved inside the chambers. Nearby were statues and carved figures that, according to the article, strongly resembled artistic styles from ancient Egypt or Asia. The walls themselves were reportedly covered with mysterious symbols and hieroglyphics that neither Kincaid nor the expedition's lead archaeologist, identified as Professor S.A. Jordan, could immediately identify. Just 4 days later, on April 9, 1909, the Arizona Gazette published a second article expanding on the discovery, presenting additional details about the layout of the cave and the remarkable collection of artifacts waiting inside. To readers at the time, it sounded like the announcement of a discovery that would completely reshape the history of North America. But then, the updates simply stopped. No photographs of the chambers were ever published, no artifacts appeared in museums, and no official scientific report followed. The expedition, along with the 2 men who allegedly steered it, seemed to vanish from the public record almost overnight. This total disappearance became just as mysterious as the cave itself. Over the years, historians and independent investigators have searched archives for documentation to confirm the expedition. The Smithsonian Institution has consistently stated that it has absolutely no record of a G.E. Kincaid or a Professor S.A. Jordan ever being employed by the institution, nor any records of artifacts matching those described in the articles. For many historians, this complete absence of official paperwork is enough to dismiss the entire episode as an elaborate newspaper hoax, a common practice during the sensationalist yellow journalism era of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Yet others argue the situation is more complex. The newspaper editions unquestionably exist, and researchers have noted that the report emerged just 3 years after the Antiquities Act of 1906 became law, which gave the federal government strict authority over significant archaeological discoveries made on public land. If a paradigm-shifting discovery had actually occurred, any official reporting would have fallen under tight federal oversight. Furthermore, the geographic reality of the Grand Canyon lends a persistent sliver of plausibility to the tale. The canyon is not a single open valley. It is an immense landscape filled with thousands of extensive natural cave systems, particularly within the massive Redwall limestone formation. Many of these sections remain incredibly dangerous and difficult to access, and even today, large portions of the canyon's cliff faces and cave networks have never been comprehensively explored or mapped. In the year 2000, the Hopi Cultural Preservation Office issued a statement concerning sacred places within the Grand Canyon. Rather than encouraging further public exploration or seeking to validate the old newspaper stories, the statement emphasized that certain locations inside the canyon hold deep spiritual significance and are entirely inappropriate for public investigation or tourism, asking instead for privacy and respect. Ultimately, the mystery remains suspended between fragmented pieces of evidence, a sensational 1909 newspaper account, an official institutional denial, an unforgiving landscape of thousands of unmapped caves, and an indigenous oral tradition that predates them all. Whether these accounts describe literal history, sacred metaphors, or a mixture of both, the Grand Canyon continues to guard its deepest places, leaving every generation to look down from the rim and wonder what truly lies hidden beneath the stone.